The interdiction. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Concord was designed to intimidate. Its architecture defied conventional physics, a vast spherical space where gravity shifted subtly across gradients, where sound carried differently depending on species' perceptual abilities, and where the very light seemed to bend around the central podium in ways that disoriented most biological entities. Dr. Mira Chen stood at that podium now, the last human representative permitted to address the assembly before the vote. Her dark eyes scanned the chamber, taking in the dozens of alien representatives arranged in concentric rings around her. Some existed as crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. Others were housed in sophisticated containment fields that simulated their home environments. Still others were barely visible, wisps of conscious energy that communicated through modulated electromagnetic pulses. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Concord, Mira began, her voice amplified and translated simultaneously into 17 different communication formats. I stand before you today, not just as a scientist, but as the voice of humanity. High Arbiter Teltherian, a being composed of interlocking geometric plates that shifted and realigned with each thought process, projected a series of holographic data arrays that spun around Mira's podium. Dr. Chen, the metallic voice resonated through the translators. Your species has been brought before this assembly for final judgment. The evidence gathered over 47 standard cycles has led to an unprecedented consensus among member species. Mira kept her expression neutral, though internally her mind was racing through probabilities, contingencies, and the careful calculations that had led to this precise moment. Her right hand, a sophisticated neural prosthetic that interfaced directly with her brain, twitched almost imperceptibly, executing a series of programmed subroutines. The evidence you present is fundamentally flawed, she countered, gesturing to the spinning data arrays. With each movement of her prosthetic hand, the holographic displays shifted, reconfiguring to highlight specific data points. What you interpret as dangerous unpredictability is actually humanity's greatest strength. The Voss representative, a collective consciousness of microscopic organisms that formed a roughly humanoid shape, stirred uncomfortably. The Helios 9 incident resulted in the destabilization of an entire star system. It communicated through a cloud of bioluminescent particles. 300,000 sentients were displaced. A tragedy, Mira acknowledged, bowing her head momentarily, but one caused by miscommunication, not malice. The Helios 9 quantum resonance field was destabilized because your scientists could not conceive that humans would approach the problem through intuitive leaps rather than linear calculations. That is precisely our concern, interjected Representative Krex, an ancient silicon-based life form whose crystalline body refracted the chamber's light into painful prismatic patterns. Your species operates through cognitive processes that defy rational prediction. You are, by your very nature, chaotic variables in an ordered universe. Mira smiled then, a small dangerous curve of her lips that made several representatives shift in what could only be interpreted as discomfort. Chaos is simply order we haven't yet understood. She raised her prosthetic arm, the advanced metalloid surface catching the light. With a gesture that was part scientific demonstration, part theatrical defiance, she sent hundreds of data points spinning around the chamber. Each point represented a human breakthrough, a moment of inspiration, a leap of logic that had solved problems the alien civilizations had deemed unsolvable. My quantum entanglement research, she continued, doesn't just challenge your understanding of physics. It challenges your understanding of consciousness itself. Humans don't just observe the universe. We interact with it through a cognitive framework that allows for simultaneous contradictory possibilities. The Trill Ambassador, a being of pure mathematical thought housed in an ornate mechanical shell, projected a series of equations into the center of the chamber. Your research suggests that human consciousness exists in a state of quantum superposition. This is not just implausible. It is dangerous. If correct, it would undermine the very foundations of our understanding of sentient interaction. Not undermine, Mira corrected, expand. Evolution has shaped human cognition differently than yours. Where you see linear progressions, we see interconnected webs. Where you apply rigid methodologies, we embrace intuitive leaps. High Arbiter Xeltharian's plates shifted into a pattern that those familiar with the species would recognize as deep concern. The Assembly has reviewed all evidence, Dr. Chen. Your arguments, while passionate, do not alter the fundamental conclusion. Humanity represents an unacceptable level of unpredictability in galactic affairs. Mira knew what was coming. This moment had been calculated, planned for, prepared for across years of careful strategy. As the representatives began the formal voting process, each species signaling consent through their unique methods, she activated the final sequence in her neural prosthetic. Humanity will not be contained by your fear, she stated calmly as the votes tallied, overwhelmingly in favor of quarantine. We will not be limited by your inability to comprehend cognitive diversity. The Assembly Chamber's security protocols activated too late. By the time the quantum shields locked down around the podium, Mira's prosthetic had already transmitted a compressed data packet, not to any device in the chamber, but through a carefully calibrated quantum entanglement channel that bypassed all conventional security measures. What have you done? Demanded Xeltharian, the universal translator struggling to convey the complex emotional harmonics in the question. Shared the truth. Mira replied simply. My complete research findings have just been transmitted to select individuals across 17 star systems. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien panic, a cacophony of electromagnetic pulses, chemical signals, and mathematical objections. You have violated Assembly protocols. The Voss collective pulsed with agitation, its humanoid form temporarily dissolving into chaotic patterns. This transmission will be traced and contained. I don't think so. Mira countered, an unsettling confidence in her voice. The transmission was routed through quantum entanglement channels. There's nothing to trace, nothing to contain. The information exists simultaneously in multiple locations, accessible only to those who understand how to look for it. This act of defiance confirms our decision, Xeltharian declared, plates locking into a rigid formation that signaled finality. The human species is hereby quarantined to their home system, effective immediately. All interstellar travel, communication, and trade with Earth and its colonies is prohibited. The quarantine will be enforced by the combined fleets of the Concord. Mira offered no resistance as security drones surrounded her. You may isolate us physically, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the commotion, but you cannot isolate human thought. We have always been defined by our ability to overcome limitations. As she was escorted from the chamber, the final vote was recorded in the Concord's eternal archives. Humanity, quarantined indefinitely by unanimous decision. Commander Elijah Okafor stood on the observation deck of Lunar Base Artemis, watching as the alien enforcement fleet took up positions around Earth's orbital pathways. Their ships defied conventional designs. Some were organic lattices that seemed to breathe in the vacuum of space. Others were geometric impossibilities that hurt the eye to focus on directly. How many? He asked without turning. Lieutenant Sasha Novik consulted her neural display. 117 capital ships, sir, plus support vessels. They've established a quarantine perimeter at the Lagrange points and deployed quantum detection fields to prevent unauthorized travel. Elijah nodded slowly. In just 3 days since the Assembly's decision, humanity had been effectively cut off from the stars. No ships in or out. No communications with off-world colonies. A species that had been reaching outward for centuries was suddenly and forcefully contained. And Dr. Chen, officially listed as detained for evaluation, Sasha replied, the skepticism clear in her voice. Unofficial sources suggest she's being held in a Concord facility in the Procyon system. Elijah turned finally, his dark face lined with determination rather than defeat. And the package? A smile flickered across Sasha's face. Received and decrypted. Teams at all 5 hidden facilities are already implementing her protocols. The commander moved to a secure terminal and placed his palm against the scanner. The screen illuminated with a complex array of data, Mira Chen's complete research, along with application parameters that few humans and no aliens would be capable of understanding without years of study. She knew this was coming, Elijah murmured. All of it. The trial, the quarantine, even her capture. It was all part of the plan. The question is, Sasha said quietly, did she also predict what comes next? Elijah's expression hardened. That's what we're about to find out. He entered a series of commands, activating a protocol that had been years in development. Across Earth and its lunar bases, select individuals, quantum physicists, cognitive specialists, neural engineers, received encrypted notifications. A shadow network, prepared for this very contingency, quietly activated. The Prometheus protocol is now active, Elijah announced to the small team gathered on the observation deck. As of this moment, we operate under the assumption that all conventional communications are monitored by Concord Intelligence. He gestured to the main display, where a complex schematic appeared, a ship unlike any in Earth's official fleet. Its design incorporated principles from Mira Chen's quantum research, technologies that the Galactic Concord believed were still theoretical. This is the paradox, he explained. Prototype vessel with an integrated quantum consciousness core, invisible to conventional detection methods because it exists in a state of quantum uncertainty until observed directly. Sir, interrupted a young engineer, the Assembly's enforcement fleet has deployed quantum detection fields specifically designed to prevent such technologies. Elijah smiled, a grim, determined expression. They designed those fields based on what they think we know about quantum mechanics. Dr. Chen's research goes far beyond that. He expanded the display, showing the ship's unique propulsion system. The paradox doesn't try to hide from detection. Instead, it presents itself as a probability wave, millions of potential configurations simultaneously, none of which match what the detection fields are programmed to identify. When do we launch? Sasha asked, already anticipating the answer. 6 hours, Elijah replied. Just enough time to load the final components and assemble the crew. This mission has been in preparation for 3 years, ever since Dr. Chen first recognized the direction the assembly was heading. The observation window automatically polarized as one of the alien vessels moved into Earth's orbital path, its impossible geometry casting strange shadows across the lunar surface. The message was clear. Humanity was contained, studied, controlled, or so they believed. Dr. Mira Chen sat in her detention cell aboard the Concord judicial vessel Eternal Equilibrium. The room was comfortable enough. The Concord didn't believe in physical punishment, but it was designed to negate any possibility of escape. The walls themselves were quantum locked, existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed, making any attempt to breach them fundamentally impossible. Or so the Concord believed. Mira sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, her neural prosthetic removed and secured in a containment field across the room. The Concord scientists had examined it thoroughly, finding nothing but expected components and programming. They hadn't understood that the prosthetic itself was merely a distraction, a convincing one that had served its purpose perfectly. The real transmission medium had been Mira herself. Years of specialized neural training had restructured her cognitive patterns, allowing her to perform certain mental operations that mimicked quantum computing processes. Her consciousness existed partially in a state of quantum superposition, something the Concord scientists had dismissed as theoretical impossibility. As she regulated her breathing, focusing her thoughts into the precise patterns she had spent years perfecting, she reached out, not physically, not even electromagnetically, but through the quantum entanglement channels that existed between her modified neural pathways and specific receiver nodes on Earth. Protocol active, she thought, not in words but in quantum states. Paradox launch window confirmed. The response came not as language, but as a pattern of quantum probabilities that resolved into meaning within her specialized neural architecture. Mission proceeding. Crew assembled. Target coordinates confirmed. Mira allowed herself a small smile. The aliens had quarantined humanity because they feared what they couldn't predict. They were about to discover just how justified that fear had been. And yet, Mira's smile faded. What she had told the assembly hadn't been a lie. Humanity didn't want conflict, didn't seek dominance. What humans offered was perspective, a cognitive framework that could solve problems the ordered minds of the Concord could never approach, if only they could see beyond their fear of the unpredictable. Perhaps, she thought as she continued her quantum communication, they soon will. The demonstration. Captain Layla Zakaria had never seen anything like the Void Nexus. Through the specialized viewing portal of the paradox, it appeared as a swirling mass of contradictions, a spatial anomaly that seemed to both exist and not exist simultaneously. Light bent around it in impossible patterns, creating visual artifacts that neurologists had warned could cause permanent brain damage with prolonged exposure. Shields at maximum, she ordered, though the word shields didn't quite capture the quantum probability field that surrounded the paradox. Status report. Dr. Victor Tamara, the ship's quantum physicist, studied readings that would have appeared as nonsensical gibberish to anyone without his specialized neural modifications. The nexus is exactly as Dr. Chen's research predicted, a region of space where quantum probabilities don't resolve. It exists in all possible states simultaneously, which is why 17 different Concord expeditions have failed to study it, added Commander Ravi Mehta, security chief. His dark eyes narrowed as he studied tactical displays. The last expedition, a Voss science vessel, was completely dissolved on the molecular level when they attempted to send probes into the phenomenon. Layla nodded, absently touching the neural implant at her temple that connected her consciousness directly to the ship's systems. The paradox wasn't just a vessel, it was an extension of its crew, designed to respond not just to commands, but to intentions, intuitions, and even subconscious impulses. The Concord sees reality as fixed, deterministic, she said, rising from the captain's chair to approach the viewing portal. They try to force the universe to conform to their understanding, rather than adapting their understanding to the universe. Which is why they're terrified of humans, Ravi added with a grim smile. We're cognitive anomalies to them, unpredictable variables in their neat equations. Victor looked up from his station. Captain, I'm detecting unusual activity within the Nexus. It appears to be responding to our presence. Layla wasn't surprised. Mira Chen's research had suggested exactly this possibility. Deploy the quantum probes. Remember, we're not trying to analyze the Nexus. We're trying to communicate with it. This was the fundamental difference in approach that made this mission possible, where Concord scientists had attempted to study the Void Nexus as an object, something to be cataloged, understood, and ultimately controlled. The Paradox crew approached it as an entity, something to be engaged with. The ship's quantum probes were unlike anything developed before. Not simple measurement devices, but complex quantum systems capable of existing in multiple states simultaneously. They didn't attempt to resolve the contradictions of the Nexus. Instead, they mirrored them, creating a resonance pattern. Probes deployed, reported Lieutenant Maya Wong from the operations console. Quantum resonance established. This is incredible. The probes aren't just sending data, they are evolving. On the main display, the visualization showed what conventional science would have deemed impossible. The probes, rather than being destroyed by the chaotic quantum fields of the Nexus, were adapting to them, their programming rewriting itself in response to new information, developing novel protocols that hadn't been explicitly programmed. Human intuition in action, Victor murmured, watching the data patterns shift and flow. We designed the probes to learn, to make intuitive leaps beyond their programming. Ravi frowned. That's exactly what the Concord fears. Technology that doesn't follow predictable parameters. Because they don't understand the value of controlled chaos, Lila replied, her fingers dancing across the neural interface controls. Sending secondary probe sequence. The void nexus pulsed, its swirling patterns shifting in what almost appeared to be a response. The quantum field surrounding the paradox fluctuated in sympathy, creating a complex dialogue of probability waves. Captain, Maya's voice held a note of wonder. I think it's communicating. The main display shifted to show a series of mathematical patterns, not the rigid, predictable equations favored by Concord scientists, but fluid, evolving expressions that seemed to breathe with life and possibility. Not just communicating, Victor corrected, his eyes wide as he studied the patterns. It's testing us. These are problem sets, quantum relationships that can't be resolved through conventional mathematics. Layla felt a smile spread across her face. Then let's show it what human intuition can do. She opened a neural interface channel, connecting her consciousness directly to the ship's quantum computing core. The sensation was difficult to describe, like diving into an ocean of possibilities, where thought itself became a tangible medium that could be shaped and directed. The other bridge officers joined her, their specialized neural implants allowing them to form a collective cognitive matrix, not a hive mind, but a synergistic network where each individual's unique thought patterns contributed to a greater whole. Together, they engaged with the mathematical problems presented by the Nexus, approaching them not through rigid logic, but through intuitive leaps, creative connections, and the uniquely human ability to hold contradictory concepts simultaneously. We're getting a response, Maya announced, her voice distant as part of her consciousness remained engaged with the neural network. The void nexus was changing, its chaotic patterns resolving into more coherent forms, though still beyond conventional understanding. It was as if the phenomenon was adapting to their communication method, finding common ground. New data incoming, Victor reported. This isn't just random quantum fluctuations. There's a pattern here, a language based on probability states rather than fixed symbols. Hours passed as the crew worked to establish meaningful communication with the Nexus. Traditional scientific methods would have demanded years of careful study and analysis. The human approach relied on intuition guided by expertise, making connections that logical processes alone could never discover. Finally, Victor's expression changed from concentration to shock. Captain, I'm detecting a coherent data structure emerging from the Nexus. It's a message. The display shifted to show a complex mathematical expression that gradually resolved into something recognizable. Not language exactly, but a representation of a stellar system, composed entirely of probability functions rather than fixed coordinates. It's showing us a location, Layla realized. Coordinates encoded in quantum states. Ravi studied the data with growing concern. That's the Procyon system, where Dr. Chen is being held. Not just the system, Maya added, her fingers flying across her console. These are exact coordinates within the system. And temporal markers. It's not just telling us where, but when. The implications were staggering. Either the Void Nexus somehow knew about their mission to rescue Mira Chen, or it's a test, Lila said quietly, the realization dawning. The Nexus isn't a natural phenomenon at all. It's artificial, a test created by someone or something to identify species capable of quantum consciousness. Victor nodded slowly. A species that can communicate through quantum states rather than just observe them. A species that can understand reality as a set of probabilities rather than fixed outcomes. A species like humans, Ravi concluded. Layla straightened in her chair, decision made. Set course for the Procyon system, quantum drive. We have a rendezvous to make, and it seems we have help. The Concord Judicial Council was rarely convened for emergency sessions. Its members, representatives from the 17 founding species of the galactic Concord, prided themselves on deliberate, measured responses to galactic events. The fact that they had assembled with less than one standard cycle of notice spoke volumes about the severity of the situation. High arbiter Xeltharian's plates shifted in patterns that conveyed deep distress as the evidence was presented on the chamber's central display. Footage from the Concord detention facility in the Procyon system showed impossibilities. A ship that appeared and disappeared from sensors at will. Security systems that reported all clear even as their visual feeds showed human operatives moving through secured areas. Most disturbing of all, the footage of Dr. Mira Chen's cell. Empty, without any record of the door ever opening. "Explain this," demanded the Voss representative, its collective consciousness pulsing with agitation. The Trill ambassador's mechanical shell emitted a series of harmonic tones that the translators rendered as frustration. The human vessel employed quantum displacement technologies that our scientists had deemed theoretical. They did not bypass our security systems. They existed in quantum superposition relative to them. "Impossible," declared Representative Krex. Crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated skepticism. Such technology would require a fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics beyond any known species. And yet, Xeltharian noted, "The evidence is before us." The council chambers fell silent as the final piece of evidence was displayed. Footage from an automated observation post near the Void Nexus. It showed the human vessel paradox approaching the phenomenon that had destroyed 17 Concord expeditions. Unlike those previous attempts, the human ship didn't attempt to penetrate the Nexus with conventional probes. Instead, it established what appeared to be a quantum resonance field, a dialogue of probability waves. And the Nexus had responded. "This cannot be disputed," Xeltharian stated, plates shifting into the pattern that indicated formal judgment. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities beyond our understanding. The quarantine has proven ineffective." "More concerning," added the Trill ambassador, "they have made contact with the void entity, a milestone that no Concord species has achieved in 7,000 cycles of attempt." The council chamber's main doors opened then, causing a ripple of surprise through the assembled representatives. Protocol dictated that emergency sessions remained sealed until formal adjournment. Dr. Mira Chen walked into the chamber, flanked not by guards, but by tall, luminous beings that no member of the council had ever seen before. The beings appeared almost human in basic shape, but their forms shifted constantly, composed of what appeared to be pure quantum probability fields. "Distinguished representatives," Mira began, her voice calm despite the historic nature of the moment, "allow me to introduce representatives of the quantum collective, the intelligence that created the phenomenon you call the Void Nexus." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of responses, electromagnetic pulses, chemical signals, and mathematical objections, before Xeltharian restored order. "Dr. Chen," the High Arbiter's translated voice held a note of accusation. "You have violated the terms of your detention and the quarantine of your species." "Yes," Mira acknowledged simply, "because the quarantine was based on a fundamental misunderstanding, one that the quantum collective has asked me to clarify." She gestured, and one of the luminous beings moved forward, its form rippling with complex patterns. When it communicated, the words seemed to form directly in the minds of the council members, translated not by technology, but by some form of direct consciousness interface. "We have observed your Concord for millennia," the being conveyed, waiting for a species capable of true quantum consciousness, minds that could perceive reality not as fixed states but as probability fields. "We created the test you call the Void Nexus to identify such a species." The council chamber remained utterly silent as the being continued. 17 of your species attempted to understand the Nexus through observation alone, trying to force it to conform to your understanding of reality. The humans approached differently. They engaged with it, allowed their understanding to be shaped by it, rather than imposing their preconceptions upon it. Mira stepped forward again. "What you fear about humanity, our unpredictability, our intuitive leaps, our ability to hold contradictory concepts simultaneously, these are precisely the qualities that allowed us to communicate with the quantum collective. We don't just observe the universe, we interact with it." Deltharian's plates shifted slowly, forming a pattern that those familiar with the species would recognize as philosophical reconsideration. You propose that human cognitive patterns represent not a danger but an evolutionary advantage. I propose, Mira corrected gently, that cognitive diversity is essential for the advancement of all species. The Concord has achieved remarkable stability and technological progress through logical linear approaches. But there are problems, like communicating with the quantum collective, that require different cognitive frameworks. The quantum beings form, pulsed with what might have been approval. We offer an exchange of knowledge with your Concord, facilitated by human intermediaries. There are realms of understanding beyond your current conception. Dimensions of existence where probability, not certainty, is the fundamental principle. For the first time, in its multi-millennium existence, the Concord Judicial Council found itself completely without precedent. The quarantine of humanity, deemed necessary just days before, now appeared not just ineffective but counterproductive. The quantum collective has existed since before your youngest stars formed, Mira explained. They have observed countless civilizations rise and fall. What they offer is not just technology but perspective, an understanding of reality that transcends conventional physics. She smiled then, the expression holding no triumph or vindication, only hope. Humanity doesn't want to disrupt your Concord. We want to contribute to it, to add our unique cognitive approach to your collective wisdom. Not as conquerors, not as revolutionaries, but as partners. High Arbiter Xeltharian's plates shifted into the formal configuration used for council proposals. I move that the quarantine of humanity be immediately suspended, pending a complete reassessment of their status within the Concord. The vote was taken, not unanimous this time, but a clear majority. Humanity would be welcomed back into galactic society, not as a potential threat to be contained, but as a valuable cognitive resource. As the formal proceedings concluded, Mira approached Xeltharian privately. "You know this is just the beginning," she said quietly. "Human unpredictability will challenge Concord protocols in ways you cannot anticipate." The High Arbiter's plates shifted in what might have been the species equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps, Dr. Chen, it is time for the Concord itself to embrace a little unpredictability." Outside the council chambers, the quantum beings waited, their forms rippling with potential, living embodiments of the principle that reality itself was not fixed but fluid, not determined but probable. And humanity, with its chaotic thought patterns and intuitive leaps, stood at the interface between the ordered certainty of the Concord and the quantum possibilities of what lay beyond. Captain Layla Zakaria stood on the observation deck of the Paradox, watching as Concord vessels approached not in hostile formation, but in ceremonial escort. After decades of being viewed with suspicion and fear, humanity was being welcomed as a valuable member of the galactic community. "Do you think they understand yet?" asked Ravi, joining her at the viewport. "Really understand what makes humans different?" Layla considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally, "but they're beginning to ask the right questions. And that's how understanding begins, not with certainty, but with curiosity." Beyond the viewport, stars shimmered against the void, fixed points to conventional observation, but to the quantum-enhanced perception of the Paradox crew. They were more than that. They were probability clouds, potential futures, paths not yet taken but waiting to be explored. Humanity had been dismissed, contained, feared, until they demonstrated what made them unique in the galaxy: the ability to see beyond the fixed and certain, to embrace the chaotic and unpredictable, and to find patterns in what others perceived as noise. It was not strength or technology, or even intelligence that had secured humanity's place among the stars. It was perspective, the cognitive gift of seeing possibility where others saw only limitation. And as the Paradox moved to join the Concord fleet, Layla knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would transform not just humanity, but the entire galactic community. The future was not fixed but fluid, not a destination but a probability field of infinite potential. Just like humanity itself. The end.